Guys, welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be continuing on with our iOS development with UIKit tutorial series. And in this particular tutorial we are going to be taking a look at the UI rotation gesture recognizer. Now, what is a UI rotation gesture recognizer? Well, this specific gesture recognizer is for allowing for the recognition of a gesture where we rotate our fingers around each other as if we were like rotating a dial. And this is particularly useful for if, for example, you need to rotate like a view or part of a view on screen. For example, the MapKit map view, that allows for a rotation gesture where you can rotate the map. If you need to, in a photo editing application on the iPad, maybe you need to rotate your photo or something like that around. That would be done with a rotation gesture, stuff like that. So, how then do we implement a rotation gesture recognizer? Well, it's very similar to how we implement a pinch gesture. So I have just brought in the code that we wrote in the last video to scale a Swift SF symbol. However, we are going to change it. We're going to change this code to instead rotate it, not scale it. And instead of using a pinch gesture recognizer, we are going to use a rotation gesture recognizer. So, if you haven't watched that video, watch that one first and then come back. Finished watching? Cool. So, inside of Xcode, let's start at the top of our file. So instead of so here where we declare our gesture recognizer, you can see we have let pinch recognizer equals UI pinch gesture recognizer. Well, we want to change this. So instead of pinch recognizer, I want rotate or rotation recognizer. Rotation. There we go. And then instead of UI pinch gesture recognizer, it'll be UI rotation gesture recognizer. Make sure the target is self, not nil. I made that mistake in the last video. So instead of it working, it didn't initially. And then for the action, instead of detected pinch, we want detected rotation. Okay. Detected rotation, like that. All right. Alright, so 1 second here. Okay, there are no notifications then. I thought there was. Alright, so now that we have our rotation gesture recognizer, let's continue on. Now, make sure is user interaction enabled is still set to true on our image view. However, one thing that we should also do with our image view here is make sure that the anchor point of our layer is set to be in the center of the image view's bounds. So that way when we do our rotation gesture, it looks a little bit more natural. So how we do that is by saying image view dot layer dot anchor point all right. So this should be I believe this this should go from 0 to 1. So we'll set equals 0.5. So that way it's in the center. Well, we have to make this a CG point. X. Okay, CG point. Well, So let's try it without explicitly setting our anchor point, just to experiment a little bit. And then where we have our add gesture recognizer, we will, instead of pinch gesture recognizer, it'll be rotation recognizer. All right. Although what I will also do is I will print image view dot layer dot anchor point, and then we'll be able to see in the console what that anchor point is, just in case something isn't right. Now we'll rename this action method. Instead of detected pinch, it'll be detected rotation. And then instead of UI pinch recognizer or UI pinch gesture recognizer for the sender, we want UI rotation gesture recognizer. All right, so the first thing that we're doing in this method is we're going to check to make sure that our gesture recognizer has a view associated with it. If it doesn't, simply return, because we can't do anything if there's no view associated with the gesture recognizer. Next, we need to get the state of our gesture recognizer. So we're saying let state equals sender.state. Now, scale. This is going to be different because we're not dealing with scale. Now we're going to be dealing with rotation. And when we're dealing with rotation in our gesture recognizer and in the CG affine transform that we're going to apply with the transform property on the views layer, and all of that, that is done in radians, not degrees. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind here. So let's say, instead of let scale, we'll say let rotation equals sender dot rotation. So you can see here, even in the documentation inline in Xcode, it says, hey, this is in radians. Now, we need to test if the state of the gesture recognition is in began or if it's changed rather than ended, because if it's ended, we don't want to do anything. We only want to do something if the gesture has begun, or if it's going through the gesture already after it's begun. So if that's true, we apply the transform. So sender view dot transform equals sender view dot transform, and then we need to, instead of scale by, period, scaled by it'll be dot rotated by. Now, this method also takes radians, not degrees. So here we will simply pass in rotation, like that. And then the last thing that we need to do is we need to reset the rotation back to 0. Not 1, but 0. Because if we do not do that, if we don't handle it with care, this gesture, much like with scaling, you could end up exponentially increasing the rotation, and it would rotate way too quickly. Right? So you need to reset this back to 0, the rotation back to 0 every single time you do your transform, because then you have more of a linear rotation being performed there. So sender.scale equals 0. Just like that. Even by setting it to 1, you're still it's still not great. So you have to do 0. And there we go. That's how we need to change our pinch gesture recognizer code to be UI rotation gesture recognizer instead of the pinch gesture. Okay, so we need to double check here. So instead of scale, it'll be rotation. Okay, there we go. Let's go ahead and run this code now. I'm going to unlock my phone here, because it's going to want to run on my phone. Come on, Face ID. Okay, Face ID didn't want to work, because of course not.
680 98765 321 2 0.
Alright, Xcode, if you could stop yapping in my ear. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to screen mirror for you so you guys can see it. Okay. I'm going to screen mirror to my Mac here. Alright, so here we are. Here we are inside of our application. I'm going to turn off VoiceOver. And then we're going to rotate this image. So we're going to use 2 fingers and then rotate like we're rotating a knob. So you can see how that's rotating there. Now, with that, let's double check the console. So we can go into our debug area, console. Okay, so you can see our anchor point on our layer is in the center of our view's bounds at 0.5, 0.5. So that step of making sure that the anchor point of your view's layer is in the center should be done if you have already set it elsewhere for whatever reason. That is good information to know. All right. So with that pretty much does it for UI Rotation Gesture Recognizer. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.